Hi, my name is Nikki Fanning, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my thoughts on a constructivism classroom. What is it, and how can we use it? Constructionism is a theory about how people learn, and basically what this theory is saying is that in order for learning to occur, we need to make connections between experiences, new experiences, old experience, and make it all make sense to us. Constructionism is a very, in my opinion, a very personal learning style. So we need to be able to make those connections ourselves. Well, who came up with this theory? And you guys will have to forgive me because I know I will not pronounce this man's name right, but I don't know if it's Jean Paget or Jean Paget, whatever, but he came up with cognitive constructionism. And what this is, or what he felt this is when we learn from our experiences, when we make connections between our previous experiences and new experiences to make learning make sense. He thinks that children's play is a very important part of the learning process. He also felt that in order for students to mature and to be able to learn, we must mature and grow, and that's when learning occurs best, is when we learn from our experiences. And if you think about the whole concept of children playing, it makes perfect sense because children play school and they go to the grocery store and they play house, and that's how they learn our social norms, I guess you could say, is through play. So why not have them play cards to teach them their numbers? I mean, play could be a very important part of the learning process. Another theorist, and yet again I won't pronounce his name correctly at all, it's Lev Vygotsky, and he came up with social constructionism. And his thoughts on this was that learning occurs best in a social structure, when we interact with other people, when we work together and collaborate together. And if you think about it, the social constructionism would go along well with Paget's play theory, because when children are playing, that's a social time, and they're learning at the same time while they're playing. He also felt that speech and thought were very important in the learning process. Well, how is the curriculum different in the constructive classroom versus a traditional? Well, as far as the curriculum goes, traditional, they start out with parts of a whole. And the constructivist classroom, we're going to start with the whole thing. So in a traditional classroom, we would start out with apple slices and put them together to make the apple. And probably in a traditional classroom, they'd all be evenly cut little slices of apples. Whereas in a constructive, we're going to take this whole apple and we're going to cut it into all kinds of different little bitty parts. We may have squares, and we make slices, and we may have half slices. But we're still going to take all those little bitty slices and figure out how they fit together to make that whole. But we're going to start with the whole first. Also in traditional classroom, you're going to start with basic skills. They're focused on basic skills. We're going to read it, we're going to write it. We're going to read it, we're going to write it, which is very boring. Whereas the constructivist classroom, we're going to use various types of skills. We may use dominoes to learn our multiplications of fives. We may use the Uno game to learn our colors. Just different types of skills in order for learning to occur. Well, how are the students viewed in a traditional versus a constructive? Well, traditional students are basically recipients of knowledge, which means they're empty little water bottles that we're just going to fill up with all kinds of information. We're going to tell them what we want them to know. Whereas in a constructive classroom, we're going to let them figure it out for themselves. We're going to give them the idea, but we're going to give them the idea and help them to find ways to make it makes sense to them. Well, how is the work different? Traditional work, students work on their own. They're going to sit all by themselves at their desk, and they're going to try to be quiet, try to be good, and try to make it all make sense to themselves. You're going to read it, and they're going to write it again. In a constructive classroom, we're going to do group work. We're going to do projects. We're going to, sit down, and we're going to have discussions. We're going to talk about how this whole apple can be cut up into little bitty pieces. We're going to have social interaction to help make the learning more personal. Well, if it's a personal classroom, then what is a teacher's role? Well, in a traditional classroom, the teacher tells them what we want them to know. I want you to know little Johnny is 9 and he's going to grow up and be a doctor. Teacher takes a very directive role. It's all from point A to point B. I'm going to tell you this because this is what I want you to know. Whereas in a constructive classroom, the teacher's going to take more of an interactive role, and she's going to ask the big questions and say, she's going to say, well, little Johnny is 9, and you tell me what you think he's going to grow up to be. Why do you think that? She's going to help to guide students through the learning process. She's not going to tell them what she wants them to know. She's going to help them learn ways to figure it out on their own, which is a wonderful, skill to have as an adult. It's very helpful because nobody's going to tell you what they want you to know. So why not start them out when they're young and help them learn how to do this from an early age? Well, how are we going to assess these students? Traditional assessment is just, we're going to give them tests. We're going to take a reading test and a math test. We're going to fill in all the little dots. Just the traditional dreaded test that we all hate. In a constructive classroom, though, the teacher's going to have to pay more attention. She's going to be watching them and observing them and just seeing what they're learning and talking to them to see what they're learning and just asking questions. And she'll be giving them projects so that learning is not just from an A to a B, but it's A, B, C, and D, all the way around to make the whole concept come together. And she's going to be asking points of view and just asking their opinions to find out what they have learned through the projects and through the information. Now, the PAR model and lesson structure. Well, what is this and how are we ever going to use that? Well, the PAR model is basically broke down into 3 parts, with P standing for present. And we're going to spend about 35% of our class time or so presenting new material. Whatever we're learning new for the day, we're going to explain the learning goals. We're going to talk about why it's important to know this. Why do we need to know how many nickels it takes to make a quarter? We're going to show them some strategies. We're going to ask the big questions, and we're going to kind of keep a progress check on from what kind of reiterate some key points from yesterday and keep everything flowing. In the A aspect of the PAR model, which is apply, this is where we're going to spend most of our time, at least 60% of our time working. And we're going to give them tasks. We're going to give them projects. We're going to give them things to do to apply this knowledge. We talked about before in the present part about why it was important. Now we're going to have them see if they can make the connections to understand why it's important. And we're going to do that by using learning strategies. Like I said before, you can use dominoes to teach them their multiplication tables. And as always, teachers need to be encouraging. Everybody needs some encouragement. Even your A students sometimes need to know that they're on the right track and they're making the right connections. Sometimes you're on the right train of thought and you get a little hung up and you just need that extra encouragement to say, hey, you're on the right track, keep going, tell me what you're thinking. I know a lot of times, personally, I'll tell my husband, I don't know how in the world I'm supposed to write this out and make it make sense. And he'll say to me, well, honey, what is it you're trying to say? And then I will tell him, and he'll say, well, that makes perfect sense, write it like that. And it's just encouragement. That's all it is. You know, even grown-ups need it. The last part of the PAR model is the R, which is for review, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time reviewing. You know, hopefully between presenting the new ideas and applying those new ideas to important things that are relative, that make sense to them, that show that it's going to be useful, that they need later, that we shouldn't have to spend a whole lot of time reviewing. But during this review time, we're going to just go over the key points, see if they understand, and I would like, you know, question and answer. I would like to ask them, well, what did you learn? Tell me why you learned this. Tell me why you think it makes sense. I want to know if they really understand. I don't want them just giving me back the information I told them. I want to hear it in their own words. The reason why the PAR works so well within constructionism classroom is because both of these concepts, these way of teaching, let students make connections, let them make personal connections. I feel like the constructionist is a very personal form of teaching, and I think that using these together allows students to make those personal connections, because you know, if you make that personal connection, the learning is going to occur. You're going to hold on to the information longer, and you're not just going to be learning it to pass the test. Another reason why these two work together is because the group work works for both. You can use group work in either one, and group work is, I have mixed feelings about group work. Group work can be good, but group work, you know, sometimes you don't always have the best experience with it. But I do tell a lot of people, I work at a college with incoming freshmen, and I tell them, make a buddy. Always make a buddy and get involved in study groups, because sometimes somebody can explain something in a way that makes it make sense to you, makes it personal for you. So group work can be a very positive experience. In my opinion, the best part about this PAR and the constructionism is because they both encourage independent learning. Because if you don't make it personal, if you don't make it make sense to you, you're not going to retain the information. If you don't retain the information, then you have not really learned it. So to me, independent learning is probably the best aspect of this type of teaching. Now, if I was going to teach a class using the PAR method, and I went very simple, counting money with first graders, this is how I would implement that strategy. The first part, of course, would be the present, and we would discuss the importance of money. And I would ask students, tell me what you know about money. You know, why is money important? Why do we need money? And then I would go over the different types of coins, because we're just going to be working with coins, because we got to get coins down before we can get to dollars. But I would start out with coins, and we'd talk about how the penny is worth 1 cent, and you know, and go from there. The next thing that I would do is a money activity. You know, going back to the playtime and learning through playing, I would have the students play like they were going to the store to buy a snack. And they would need to tell me how many quarters, nickels, and dimes that they would have to have in order to buy their snack. I would also give them like little worksheets that they could make it make sense. You know, pennies are copper colored or brown colored, and have them color them different colors and see if that would help them kind of connect 1 cent to a penny and 10 cents to a dime. And I would probably do that before I did the money activity. And while they're doing the money activity, I think I would probably just walk around and see what connections that the students are making to the money, the idea of money, and just give extra help where it is needed. And encourage. The review part, I think I would just, obviously wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on this, because I would be hoping that they had got the information during the apply aspect of of our lesson, but go back and ask questions. And I really feel like it's important to ask questions of students to get their thoughts, because I don't want them I don't want them telling me what I told them. I want you to tell me what you think, so that I can see if you really made all the connections. And yet again, if it's not personal, you're not going to remember it. And then we would probably review, the key points, just go over it one more time. Maybe make a little song out of it, because you know how kids love to sing. And then I would give home review handouts to take home, just kind of, to take home and go over it at night, just to kind of give them a little more review, to reiterate what I had said during class that day. And that is what I would do to teach children how to count money. I hope you all have enjoyed my little presentation here. And please forgive me. I am still not got over my cold yet. So beauty was not high up on my list of getting this project done. But thank you all for watching.